Yeah. All right. I think we're about ready. I think we have everybody in for the most part from the waiting room. So we'll go ahead and kick it off. Welcome to our state and regional, our ACRO webinar. And today's topic will be exploring recruitment and admissions. So for any, recruitment admissions folks, some of this may be things that you know or want to learn more about. But if you're not in the recruitment and admissions side, maybe more on the registrar side, our hope is that we can enlighten you a little bit on how we get these students in the door. So we'll kick it off with introductions. And then we'll move into talking a little bit about what more specifically we'll talk about today and then go from there. As always, there's going to be room at the end for kind of open discussion. We have some topics that you can sound off on. But if at any time you have questions, feel free. You can use the chat. We'll check out there. This is informal, so we're excited to just have a conversation today with a few guiding slides to get us going. So, but I'll start with my introduction and then I'll kick it off to Laura. My name is Kristen Schmigelski. I am the Dean of Enrollment Management at Parkland College. Parkland College is a community college located in East Central Illinois. We are about 2.5 hours from Chicago. We are located just about 10 miles from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So kind of in our backyard, which also is nice to have that strong relationship there. I oversee admissions and records, financial aid, as well as our assessment center for all our placement testing. And I have been in this role at Parkland for 5 years. Prior to that, though, I worked across town at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in the undergraduate admissions office. So I started there back in 2005 as an admissions counselor, and then got more into working with transfer students, ended up as the transfer coordinator. Then I started to oversee a little bit more on the processing side and more of the operational work. So I have like a recruitment hat, but I also have more of that operational and articulation hat, which ultimately led me to make the change to come over here because I'd worked with community college students all the time. I'd worked with community college counselors and administrators. So I always thought that this could be a place where I make the leap to and learn more. And it definitely has broadened my horizons on things that, being in higher ed for over 18 years and still learning pretty much something new every day, which is good, right? That keeps it interesting, but it's amazing on some of the times I'm thinking like, how did I not know that? Or how has that not come up before? So it's always good to keep it interesting, I think. But so that's a little bit about me. I'll kick it over to Laura.
Thank you, Kristen. Laura Remillard. I'm the program manager for a fairly new program at the School of Medicine at Stanford. It's the Master's in Translational Research and Applied Medicine. And as I said, it's a fairly new program. We're going into our second year starting this fall. Before going into the MTRAM program, as we call it, I was the Associate Director of Graduate Admissions, also at Stanford. And before that, I was working in the registrar's office. So altogether, perhaps about 11 years at Stanford, and before that at for-profits, higher educational institutions. And before that, I was actually in publishing. And my forte in that field was really rights and permissions. So I was an acquisitions editor and learned a lot about saying no and very strict about deadlines. So all of that has come into play and where I am now. And so my experience really is in admissions, and as a program manager in this new program at Stanford, we that really comes into play. And I'll go into a little bit more about that. So I agree with Kristen. This is going to be very informal, and we welcome questions, and hopefully we can make this conversational. So I'm going to kick it back to Kristen so we can get started with our slides.
Sure. Thank you. We can go to the next slide, Velma. So here these are just kind of the four main areas that we'll talk about today. So we'll kind of jumpstart with recruitment, and that's where it all begins. And then, and why this is, I think this is really cool is because you have two completely different perspectives, two completely different schools. So you'll get, the community college side, but also the grad level side as well. And so we can, and you can kind of see how you'll probably hear a lot of differences, but overall similar themes, which I think is also neat because so much of what we do in admissions is you take an idea that maybe somebody has or concept, that's not going to fit exactly with how you do things, but you can adapt it, and so it's making it adaptable to fit your process, and what will work best for you. So I always like to say you don't reinvent the wheel with completely brand new ideas. If you don't have to, you can kind of beg, borrow, and steal a little bit, but also make it your own, which is nice. So we'll talk about recruitment. We'll then move into like a more of our admissions process and what that looks like, for each of our areas and our schools. And then just technology nowadays is really taken off. There's tons of vendors out there, and I know all of our institutions use them to a certain extent, but how is that impacting what we do, even in our daily work? And then the fourth area we'll just kind of talk, we called trending. So your opportunity, this is where we would encourage some participation, your opportunity to sound off. We have a list of just topics, but we can go off script. That we can maybe start off with a few of our own thoughts and where we think it's headed, but then we'd like to turn it over to the audience to just kind of pitch in and get your 2 cents on, just to see, do a little bit of networking and see what everybody thinks. So that's the plan. So we'll go to the next slide then. So yeah, we'll start off with recruitment, as I said. And Belma, you can even go to the next one from here. So I'll start by talking about, I call this community college recruitment, although as I said in the beginning, you may look at this and say, this is exactly what we do at our school too. But the enrollment funnel, I put an image in there, but this is something that admissions offices use over and over and over again to explain how a student kind of moves through that pipeline. So of course, they start off as a prospect or an inquiry. So potentially, we define a prospect as somebody who has taken the initiative to get on our mailing list or attended an event. So they've had to do something actionable, for them to end up on our radar. So then they would start off there in the funnel. And then from there, they could fizzle out and lose interest. But the goal is to keep moving students from point A to point B, so on and so forth. So after that, moving on to the applicant phase. So once you have them as a prospect, of course you want them to enroll, but you have to get them to the applicant phase to even apply, to show that next level of interest. From there, then accepting the student to your college or university. And this is where community colleges are different. And I'll talk about this later on, but we accept everybody. So we're open enrollment. So for us, that applicant and accept phase actually is kind of one and the same because everybody ends up being accepted. But that's not going to be true, of course, at other schools that aren't open enrollment. And then getting them, this, I would say again, for community colleges, that initial enrollment is really important. But our efforts, we have so many students who swirl and stop out. They'll come to Parkland for a semester, potentially, say, well, now I have to focus on working full time. I'm going to stop out the next semester, but then I'm going to come back in the fall. And so I feel like a lot of our recruitment, like when I first took the job and I'm like, okay, recruitment's a big part. And of course, my mindset was on brand new, more traditional age students, which that's what I was used to. And all of a sudden, my eyes opened up to, no, this is also, that retention piece. I mean, obviously retaining them from semester to semester, but when you do lose them for a semester or two and they stop out, trying to get them back and kind of re-engage with the campus and community. So realizing that that's part of recruitment too is kind of a big realization for me. Recruitment has evolved over time. Again, like going back to 2005, I think pretty much our main source of recruitment was college fairs. So, you'll have 100 or so colleges and universities and a high school gym with students and parents walking around and trying to get as much information as they can and questions answered and, writing names on inquiry cards, handwritten, handing it over. And we had just started, when I first started in that office at U of I, we had just started high school visits. In fact, it was like hey, here's this thing we're going to try. We're going to go to schools. And I mean, I think other universities had kind of started doing that, but it wasn't really necessarily the norm. And so then it turned into college fairs and high school visits. But how it's really evolved is not just, I think, not just recruiting the student, but you're recruiting a lot of times the parents, the families, high school counselors, community college counselors. So the more, we've learned, I think the more trust you have from people who play an important role in that student's decision, that's actually coming at it from a good recruitment standpoint too. So Parkland will do parent information nights. Of course, students are welcome, but our main focus is to talk to the parents about the value of community college and what that, the degree looks like and how it transfers and how we can help facilitate that for them. We also do a lot of high school counselor events too. So we have a high school counselor advisory board that we meet with once or twice a year. And we just bounce ideas off of them. If there's anything new we're looking at doing in our process or maybe making a change to our application, we literally just run those ideas by them and see what they think and what their reaction is. But then on the flip side, we leave it as an open conversation for them to tell us what we could be doing better. And we've really received a lot of good feedback on that event. And we have, like, we always go through each year to see what changes we've made from that, because it's nice to see that we're using them as an avenue to help us, help inform us, since they have that direct contact with students as well. We've also ventured into, from more of like I guess this ties in with admissions and marketing. That is such an important relationship. I think that's not realized always by everybody else on campus. So the tie to making sure messages are consistent, they're not duplicating efforts. So if admissions is sending an email and marketing wants to send a postcard with a similar message, that those are timed appropriately. So I think forming those relationships early on are really important to make sure you're working to complement one another, not working against one another, because that can be difficult when you hear, oh, the student got a postcard in the mail, but it contradicts maybe what was just sent, or the timing didn't seem to make sense. So I think from just sort of the standpoint of what type of materials are produced and the timing of them, but also the content, the writing of the content. And I find a lot of value in, just supplying a few bullet points for marketing, but I just have them write it for us. And so structures on campus and your campus could be completely different. But if you have an outlet to a marketing department, and it's not being fully utilized, I think that's something that I would definitely, try and tap into as much as possible, get them on your side, because it will help in the long run. When the plan comes together, it all just kind of then makes sense, which is nice to see. And then again, in the community college world with recruitment, I've talked about the high school counselors, but outside of that, kind of the external constituents, talking about community-based organizations. We go and recruit in churches. So we'll go to church events. I've spent time on Sunday morning taking the last few minutes of a service to talk about Parkland and opportunities there. Having tie in with workforce development's really important with kind of in our enrollment picture. So having relationships with local businesses and companies to understand what their needs are. Because again, the nice thing is if they have a need, we can usually fulfill that. So we can even create a program. It might be a certificate program. We're able to be pretty nimble in making sure that happens, so that if they guarantee 20 students in a cohort, we're able to create that. So having that relationship, though, is really important, because we don't know what we don't know. So we try and spend a lot of time at setting up employer tables and for employees at various companies, And then in our area, Champaign-Urbana, we have two main hospitals, so healthcare is really important. So we also use our major hospitals to help us um, with health profession recruitment. But even outside of that, just getting people to understand that they can come here for, like, they might work at the hospital, not in a healthcare capacity necessarily, but that we're here for, general education purposes. And that's something that can kind of help kickstart their college career. So that's a little bit about community college recruitment.
Thanks, Kristen. So, Velma, if you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So, I'm going to chat a little bit about Stanford, and specifically at the School of Medicine and the program that I am in. So, as I mentioned before, the program I'm in is a fairly new master's degree program. We just finished this last week, in fact, the graduation of our first cohort. And this program was approved by the Faculty Senate last year in May or June, and it officially started in the fall in September. So that means that they had a very short period to do marketing, to do recruitment and admissions. So they kept the cohort very small. So with that, they recruited basically from within the university, and sending out feelers to programs. And what's really nice about our program, although it is in the School of Medicine, it really piques the interest of people who are engineering students, perhaps bioengineering, people who in business, because of the nature of the program itself. People with a variety of backgrounds, excuse me, they can use our program sort of as a jumping board to a springboard to so many other careers. So, knowing that we just finished our first year, we don't want to do what we did last year and only have a few months to do our recruitment and marketing. So we started really as early as March, talking to a marketing consultant who we touched base with last fall. And we aligned ourselves with her because she's worked with a few other School of Medicine programs with big success. So it was her direction to say, you better get an early start on the marketing and recruitment of this. And so what we did was we started with this marketing consultant, and we knew that it had to be intentional to focus in on this coming year. So with the application going live this Friday, actually, we really wanted to focus having a hard-hitting marketing campaign starting like in April and May. So we started with Google ads and LinkedIn ads. And I started using social media, Twitter and LinkedIn. I'm not so much of a big Facebook, but we found quite success with our LinkedIn and Twitter. And then what we did was Stanford has hundreds of mailing lists. And so I am a member of a bunch of those. And we also have an internal instant messaging system, which has various channels. So I belong to many of those. And so I've used those myself to speak about our program. And also there are medical journals. We placed ads in those. And then we have pharmaceutical companies who we've reached out to. And also our advisory board, we have about 9 members on our advisory boards, and these are vice presidents, CEOs of major pharmaceuticals and bioengineering companies. And so we've reached out to them as well. And so they have also marketed and recruited from their fields as well. And ultimately, we're seeing a lot of interest in certificate programs. That's a whole different other subject, but all of this really is generating, all of this work is generating interest in our little program so much that we started off with 6 students, and we have admitted for this fall to start 12. So we've doubled, and so who knows what's going to happen next year with our marketing efforts. Um, and also informational sessions. I don't want to leave that out. Those are very important. So we have several that we want to do this coming fall. And we did have 2 last year. So what we did was we recorded those, and already this year we received a number of inquiries from prospective applicants who are interested in our program. So what we've done is send them copies of our recorded recordings of our informational sessions from last year. So, so I guess, you know, when I look back at all of this, it's strong marketing, strong recruitment, and it's very intentional. It's very narrowed in its focus, simply because we are a specific program. And I know that there are other programs at the university who have the funds where they can actually send employees to various places to do recruitment. We're not quite there yet, but we're finding a lot of success. We've already doubled our enrollment for this fall, and with our little recruiting campaign. So we're hoping to keep going forward in the years to come. Velma, could you please go to the next slide? And so we're going to go into admissions now, and I think we're back to Kristen, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and Belma, you can go to the next one after. So now we're going to go into a little bit more about our admissions process. And so, of course, I'll talk about what that looks like at a community college. And you can go to the next slide again, Belma. So pretty simple here. As I said earlier, we are open enrollment, open access. So we admit everybody that applies. Our application is online. Believe it or not, we still had a few paper applications floating out there, but I think we finally said no more, all online. And there's no application fee to apply unless you're an international student needing a visa. And so we make that part simple. We do have certain questions on our application that we have to ask for our Illinois Community College Board reporting purposes, but otherwise we try and really, you know, we always get all those requests of, can you add, well, let's just add that to the app. Let's just add that question to the app. And so that sometimes becomes challenging because, yeah, although convenient maybe to get that data from the application, we have to look at you always have to consider what the student experience is. And if it's no longer an easy application for them to fill out, especially if you want it to be an easy application, which we do, then that might not be the best course of action. So once we get an application submitted online, we're able to accept a student really within about 48 hours for sure. They'll get their acceptance letter and then kind of go through the process through there. Now, process wise, you know, it's interesting because and this again was sort of like a mindset change coming to a community college where, yeah, so everybody gets accepted, but then you have placement tests, as most schools do. And so we'll look at placement based on students' ACT, SAT, or most of them just take our own placement tests in reading, English, and math. But students don't always place, surprisingly, will say, okay, yeah, no problem. I'll just start off in English 101. They take the placement test and actually they're not placing into college level English. So there may be some developmental work that they'd have to do leading up into there. So that's where it becomes an interesting conversation, you know, because the student in their mind might think I'm jumping right in. Where at a 4-year, depending upon, you know, the school, they may right away because they went through that admissions process to get to that to standard to know they would be in college level courses. But it just depends on the school and depends on the student. So we have that conversation a lot with students and kind of mapping out, you know, you have to take this class before you can get into English 101 and so on and so forth. So the process then from there is, they take their placement tests, we still meet with an academic advisor. We actually just implemented what we call an advising model. So it's cohort advising. It's been working like very well for us because now our advisors are assigned to a cohort of students and they're advising based on their academic interests. So instead of an academic advisor having to know, a little bit about every single program, over 100 and some programs, they can really just focus on an academic area and be a subject matter expert in that area. Plus, it helps them establish a relationship with a student, really get to know them. And our enrollment is up this fall, and we are very strong in our continuing student population, which I think one may think, well, obviously, those students are already here. Of course, they're going to continue, but actually, that population of continuing students, we've had declines in several years. So seeing that kind of turn back around, I'd like to think that advising model has had something to do with it. And students are required to meet with their advisor until they have 30 hours. Now, after they have 30 hours, they're not required, but we strongly encourage them to. Regardless, though, the advisors do reach out to students individually and personally, even after 30 hours, just to see if they need help or, assistance putting their schedule together. So, process wise, in a way, the pandemic helped us reduce barriers pretty significantly. There are a lot of ideas that we had prior to that where, the response was, well, we can't change this, we can't change that, and here's why. Well, then all of a sudden, fast forward into the pandemic and we need to figure out how to make things simple, virtual, provide easy access. And fortunately, those things have stayed with us. And we have reduced a lot of barriers in our process simply because we knew we could do it. We just needed a reason, I think, to be able to. Students also go through orientation. It is completely online. That was another change we made. So they're able to access it 24/7 on their own time, but it's required, although right now there really isn't anything preventing them from registering, or we don't put a hold on yet. We just launched the orientation a little over a year ago. So we're still kind of trying to get some metrics on how many students are completing it to see what we need to do. But that's also been a positive change because we used to just do one big information session. Like you would sign up for orientation and you would get all the orientation info in that one session, which may have been, 2 months before you even enrolled in the semester. And now our orientation is meant to watch over the course of time. So, we have information in there about, stress levels increasing as you get closer to midterms and withdrawing from classes. So things that might not seem relevant in June when you're sitting in orientation, but will be relevant in October. Our goal is that that orientation module is there for them to refer back to and rewatch those sections and become familiar with it. So it's been, again, a nice process change for us. And then students are able to register and, like I said, once they're over 30 hours, they're able to do that. But our job is to make sure that we're reminding them of that. And, quite honestly, and this is pretty typical, I think, of community colleges, but we get the majority of our enrollment and registration the last month leading up to the semester. So like in August, we get the majority of our fall enrollment in the month of August. So we try and get that message out there as early as possible. Don't wait. You want to make sure you have first pick at your classes. We still struggle with getting, students to follow through with that. So some of you may be able to probably attest to that in other scenarios in your job too, but something we're constantly working on. And then I would say, people will say, well, what are you admit everybody, so what are the challenges? And when I think about it, yeah, sure. So, I'm not looking at making difficult admissions decisions, but it's more than you're actually having to generate the interest initially. So enrollment, when it was down consistently, then it's like, well, we have to actually make we have to get people that aren't college bound interested in college. And so again, that's where working with our high school counselors is really important, because there are population of students that will graduate but not consider going on to any college or post-secondary education. So we have initiatives in place to kind of maybe bridge that gap for them a little bit more. And then I've already talked about this, but the workforce development part is really important to us too. So I would say, and those two are kind of the main initiatives, but it's actually it's promoting college to people that might not be thinking even at all about going, and why that's important to them. So, all right, we can go to the next slide.
Thanks, Kristen. So we can go to the next slide too as well. Thank you. So at Stanford, excuse me, has a central graduate admissions office, and they're responsible for ensuring compliance of all policies, and they are also responsible for the online application. There are some more than 70 individual graduate programs at Stanford, and most programs do not require the GRE. The admissions decisions go out by middle of April. Once in a while, there are some one-off decisions offering admission after that. And of course, decision letters are generated by the department. All departments make their decisions. When I said that the GRE is not really required, that is the case. We saw this trend occur even several years ago. It started with other universities, and we noticed that trend began, and then it really caught on to Stanford. And then ultimately, most graduate programs do not require it. So Stanford takes a holistic approach to admission. So that means that each piece of a person's application is reviewed as part of an integrated and comprehensive whole. And the university has devoted a website specifically to how this is done. And I have a quote here. It says, "Just as no two Stanford students are the same, each applicant to Stanford is unique. This means that as we review each application, we pay careful attention to unique circumstances. We take into account your background, educational pathway, and work and family responsibilities. By focusing on your achievements and context, we evaluate how you have excelled in your school environment and how you have taken advantage of what is available to you in your school and community." And as part of an admissions committee for the program I'm in, it is true. We are very selective of who we offer admissions to, but it's also it's not one rule fits all. As pointed out, I mean, everyone has unique experience, and it's really I want to use the word lovely. It's interesting, and I really enjoy reading all the applications that come in, and it is very a hard decision. But we have an admissions committee comprised of faculty, and we do make a very deep and thorough decision when that comes about. What else can I tell you about admissions? Something that also touched on what we previously discussed about recruitment. Throughout the year, we have received emails, as I've said before, from potential applicants, and many of them wanted to talk to our current students to find out their experience and how they are enjoying or not enjoying our program. So with the permission of our current students at that time, they reached out. And so I think having alumni who can speak to the program, I think that really does a lot with marketing and recruitment. I just wanted to focus in on that. And on our website, we will be having recordings of our outgoing students, alumni now. And I think that also attracts people from all over. Um, so it's pretty straightforward, our admissions process. It's all brought out on our website. And again, it is, we receive hundreds of applications, and Stanford itself, I remember my days in graduate admissions. I mean, we received tens of thousands of applications. So going through all those applications to make the decisions is not an easy task, but it is a serious task that we take very, very much to heart. So we can go on to the next slide. I think we're going to go into technology. And can you go on to the next slide, Velma? So I'm going to talk about a little about technology. When I was in graduate admissions, we were still doing a lot of things the paper way. And we had filing cabinets in that office. And I remember when I saw them, I thought, oh, one day we're going to get rid of those filing cabinets. And so I came up with a game plan on how to go electronic with our review, reviewing applications for eligibility, not making decisions on the applications, but enforcing eligibility. I came up with a game plan on that, and then COVID happened. So then we had to really enact, put all of that to work. And it was actually quite easy with the system, the CRM that we were using. At that time, we were using CollegeNet. And I do want to say something, and maybe this is maybe a tip for everybody out there, regardless of what system you're using, make sure that you're using your system to its full potential. So what I found was our system at that time could do a lot more. And for whatever reason, it wasn't being used to its full potential, and no updates. And so, but by going electronic with our process, it was easy to do with that CollegeNet system. Ultimately, we did change vendors, and now we are using Slate as our CRM. And they were moving to Slate as I left graduate admission. So I think this is going on year 2, and it really has streamlined the process quite well. It's actually very smooth. In particular, referring to transcripts, it's very easy to upload that. Before we had to scan and then upload. And it was sort of I don't know, several steps in order to use the CollegeNet system. Perhaps there would have been an easier way to do it back then. Nevertheless, with Slate, it is quite easy now to use that system. So we streamlined the process. We updated the ways departments would make entries, bypassing the student information system. In our case, PeopleSoft. So departments can now use the Slate system to enter in their decisions, and it's automated in many ways. So the Slate system can, what's the word? It populates a student ID, which we call the EMPLED, and that is a unique ID that sticks with the student from here on out at Stanford. And so we have used Slate to do that. So we're using Slate more and using PeopleSoft less is the way, the way it's going, and it's great. It's received a lot of great feedback. It did take a lot of work. It took a couple of years to prepare for that. So if you are going to make a major change, make sure that you have consultants as well, and somebody who really knows how to use that new system you're using to put it together. Before we changed over to that new system, Slate, there were there was in the Graduate School of Business, they were using Slate for some of their programs. And so we sort of collaborated with them and had several meetings with them on how they were using it. So ultimately, now the whole university is using Slate, and we're so far so good. Very happy with it. So I'm going to hand it over to Kristen.
Excellent. So we'll keep with the topic of Slate. And I think this is really neat because, again, you have two different, completely different schools, different processes. We both use Slate. So we also use the Slate CRM at Parkland. We implemented in 2019, mainly with our kind of our recruitment function. So tracking campus visits, emails, interactions with students, simple forms, things like that. But now we do use the Slate homegrown their application for admission. So when a student applies, it actually comes in through Slate, and then we upload it to our SIS from there. So that's helped with some monitoring of data and figuring out, okay, how many of those prospects end up applying and sort of what their path is from there. We also, though, our big thing is with communication. So what's been huge for us, and I talked about our relationship with marketing. So kind of something that all happened at the same time. We formed this great relationship with marketing, but we also decided we needed more, a better dedicated campaign plan. So we have now gone from just doing sort of one-off emails every once in a while to students like, oh, hey, you've applied, here are your next steps. To we have a prospective student campaign for sophomores, juniors, and seniors. We have a parent campaign. We have an adult learner campaign, and then our applicant and admitted one as well. So we've really grown the messages that we send. They're typically monthly, enough to keep us top of mind, but not be annoying, hopefully. And Slate's really helped with the tracking of that because we can open up the report, see how many people opened our email and clicked any of the links in there. If we have emails that aren't deliverable, we try and clean. I mean, usually those are easy fixes because it's just a mistyped email that we can identify quickly. So we're able to fix that. And then the next time they'll be picked up in the campaign. We also have the capability to automate more communication. We do that now when somebody signs up for an event. Right away, they'll get an automatic communication, but I'd like to do a little bit more of that with our campaign emails. But right now, we're still kind of doing it manually, which is better than nothing, so it's fine. But other things we've entered into QR code. So we have our application on, you can get to it through a QR code. We've had students literally fill it out on their smartphone. Because it is easy to do and there isn't an essay or anything. So they're able to do that. Electronic forms we've used just to capture, so for example, we have our dual credit students or high school students. They don't fill out our regular application anymore. They just do a quick form, which has made life so much easier for them because we just don't need as much information from them. But until the Slate electronic form existed, they were filling out our application, answering questions that they really, we really didn't need them to. Now we're able just to kind of cut to the chase and get the information from them that we need. And then texting, we have really taken off with it. We use Cadence or Mongoose. And we started doing that in 2021. So about 2 years ago, where we had one team. And now we have, I think, close to 13 different teams. So we have other areas on campus texting. Admissions sort of led the charge of training and here's how you use it. But now, student life, as they have, they're having karaoke this afternoon. So they can text current students about karaoke. And, admissions doesn't have to get involved, but it's another way to communicate. We are also looking into chatbot. I know a lot of schools have it. I think if you can get it right and understand how to use the system, then it could be a good tool just for some quick info. But just, again, more technology that, definitely we wouldn't have thought of existing, years and years ago that now are just it's right there at our fingertips. So I think we can go to the next section now so we can get to our trending. So this is more maybe audience participation. But Belma, if you want to go to the next slide. Well, these are just our list of kind of topics we brainstormed, came up with, things that have come up on our campus, but we can certainly add to this list. Laura, is there any particular one you wanted to start with, or?
So the virtual recruitment, I sort of touched on that with our informational sessions. We are planning to have that in the fall. And of course, in terms of marketing, we also use MailChimp. And so over the last year, I have received numerous, all emails that I get, I put it in our MailChimp account so that I can email all potential applicants, as well as all our contacts in medicine and our advisors, external advisors, and so forth. So it goes out to hundreds and hundreds of people. And so virtual recruitment, I think, is great. And I think it could really meet the masses. And then with remote work, I know that at Stanford, it's all basically per department, and it's up to the manager on how they want to do that. So in our little department, it's I have the option of being remote, but I do go to the office occasionally, and which is really nice. But for the most part, I think there is I see a push to have employees back at the office at least a couple of times a week.
I think also, I mean, for us, remote work and even staffing shortages kind of have interplayed with one another. So I don't know if anybody, like, we've had people leave because after we all returned from COVID, we said no remote work. We held a hard line. Well, then we had a lot of people looking for actively seeking opportunities where they could pretty much do the same job but work remotely. And we lost a lot of people. We have now backed off of that, and there is more flexibility with remote work. Still, not super flexible, but at least there is an option. So we're able to now advertise that in our job descriptions. But has anybody else here kind of gone round and round about remote work? Is anybody not allowing remote work and they're all fully back on campus? And or have you seen kind of the same trend of you feel like staff desire those remote work opportunities? And how's that been going for you?
Well, in our case, it's similar to what you were mentioning, Kristen, is that we're a health science university, and so they're very steeped in tradition. Everybody works on campus, it's just the way it is. You have to be present for the students, no matter what your job is. And again, this happened before the pandemic. In fact, I've been remote for quite some time now, and but it started moving that way. And certainly after the pandemic, we saw a lot more forgiveness in that area's flexibility. And I think they were smart to do that because you did see others coming along and offering, especially if it's in, let's say, New York or San Francisco, where the cost of living is really high, and they're used to paying a higher salary. You see that somebody in a more rural area, let's say maybe where you're living, like in the Midwest, they can make a higher dollar still from home with a lot less inconvenience. So we've seen a lot of that, not to mention we were running into space issues. So it's helped in that area as well. So I'm glad to say that our university did kind of accommodate and has done so. So there's all types of options now. 100%, there's hybrid, there's a lot of things. So
very good. Anyone else have experiences?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
If no one else had another comment, I wanted to just touch on the bullet on Gen Z enters the workplace, because Kristen, I was telling you that I submitted a proposal to ACRO to co-present a topic on ageism. And so my co-presenter is going to talk about the younger work group coming to work with perhaps seasoned people, and how there can be harmony and we can both learn from each other. I wrote an article for Acro Connect a couple of years ago on ageism, and it's interesting to see that studies show that places where there is, you know, diversity in ages, that they're more productive. And of course, there's more experience. And as I said before, people can learn from one another. So um, uh, I think there doesn't have to be a bias. You know, seasoned employees that have younger people and younger people vice versa, having stereotypes for older people. So I think everybody can all learn to work together.
Yeah, and I think being cognizant of the next generation that's coming through the workplace is, for me, it's always interesting. We talk about generations in terms of their needs for recruitment purposes again. But now, like, oh, this is the generation that we'll be hiring into. And there's been also a lot of, uh, articles out there that I've read about Gen Z and their motivation to move up quickly. So kind of that notion of, all right, I'm maybe in an entry level job now, but when that next level position comes open, even if it's a year later or 2 years, I'm going to apply for it. And uh, I mean, maybe get it. I don't know. I think that's related to staff shortages. And quite honestly, those are some conversations we've had because, well, if you're on a search committee and we used to get 80 to 90 applicants for a position where now we might get, let's say, 15 to 20. And even at that, you're like, oh, it's, do they have transferable skills is more of the conversation than do they have the higher ed experience. So I don't know if others have experienced that too, but I think with Gen Z too, we've seen some of our staff in those positions, maybe expecting to move up rather quickly. And so that's always been that's an interesting concept that we've been kind of thinking about as well. So, does anybody have any other thoughts on that? All right. Well, we can go on to the next because we only have 7 more minutes together. So I can talk about the enrollment cliff. This is kind of, the hot button item, I think, with enrollment management nationally, but the notion that starting in 2025, more or less, um, we will see a significant decline of high school graduates and students because of the Great Recession and birth rates declining then, now impact us, 17, 18 years later. So I think this is really interesting. I mean, it definitely depends on, if you look at your particular area of the country, there are some countries that may be impacted slightly, but it's not going to be that big of an impact, where others it's a little bit more significant. But for us, I mean, schools I think are already preparing for this. It could be something to, if you're not familiar with and you find yourself in a meeting of, recruitment or admissions, like people maybe ask what are some things being done, because I think trying to be as prepared as possible, but how is there some sort of restructuring that needs to happen? Does your recruitment focus need to shift? I mean, for us, yeah, we will still recruit obviously traditional age students, but knowing that we're going to probably see that population decline. So then, as I talked about that adult population, how can we ramp up our efforts to get students to come back to school, or even if they have a degree already, get them to come back to kind of upskill or retool what they're doing, and be there to offer that for them when that time comes. So I mean, there's all sorts of talk out there on what this will exactly look like, but I think it's something to be aware of, and be mindful of. For a while that seemed really far away, and now I'm like, 2025 is not that far. It'll be here. And I think the last thing you want to do is be sitting there thinking like, what happened? So have kind of knowing that going into it, I think is really helpful. But have you been talking about any major initiatives or things to help balance out the enrollment cliff when it comes time? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there's a comment that there's been lots of meetings, but still looking at those adult learners is probably key. Obviously, it'll depend on the institution as well. Community college, and then even among 4 years, I think, in terms of if it's a regional campus, um, highly selective, versus not. So it's really going to vary. Thoughts? All right. Well, food for thought, something to look at. I'm sure there'll be a lot more coming out too, article wise. Um, funding. Laura, was funding more like, I know I'm trying to think, just
Uh,
care of.
gosh, I don't even remember anymore. We put
It's
this list
just on
together ages ago.
there. We can skip to AI and chat GPT. We only have 3 more minutes maybe. Because this one's kind of interesting of um again, I think another hot item is how could AI impact the jobs that we do? Um, making our lives easier, but would it ever get to the point of replacing staff? Again, I think with admissions decisions, there's been talk of, um, those decisions can be automated, but how could they even be a little bit more automated? Therefore, not maybe needing as many people to review um, applications, and then you would cut your staff down. I think about processing of applications. For us, we do have some automation, but if you really had a lot in there, and I mean, I think AI is a little bit different than just automation, but again, it all goes back to, wow, that could be really cool, but what impacts would we see in our campus and our community? And then losing like any personal touch too. So even talking about the chat bot, instead of having somebody come into your office and have a face-to-face conversation to get their questions answered, thinking about that could be answered, by a robot just without leaving your living room, is just a different way of thinking. And then chat GPT for us, I mean, it's just again more on the faculty side of things, but yeah, it's out there and students are using it. And sort of what are, if your campus has anything in place to prevent that or take that into, I don't know, how are you possibly vetting the work that's done to make sure it's the students' own work too? So any thoughts on that? Either of those items?
Or any questions at all? Any other questions?
I'll chime in again. We use Turnitin. Well, ours, first of all, the program I work in is an online program, and not all of ours are. It's a graduate university, so we have a lot of residential, but we're trying to embrace it at this point because it's more of a let's not fight it and make it such an issue. Although we're implementing a policy now, have yet to lay eyes on that, but what we're encouraging, because especially in an online program, there's lots of writing, as we would expect, and we run things through Turnitin in our case, and now Turnitin has built in an AI screening separate from their plagiarism check, so it kind of helps pick up with that. So we really want to emphasize original thought and paraphrasing, synthesizing the material they read, and so that we've increased the point value and the rubric on that. So, I mean, we've had some assignments, for example, that the paragraphs were almost duplicate in 3 paragraphs. So we know they're using AI. So as long as we're filtering and having eyes on it as faculty, I think that we can at least deflect it a little bit or deter people from using it to an excess. But it's definitely been a challenge.
I think even too, when we talk about admissions review, like filling out your application, if you have to write an essay. When I was at U of I, and of course this was before Chat GPT, but definitely Google was a thing. And sometimes we would read an essay and be like, this just doesn't sound like something the student wrote, copied into Google, and sure enough, it was right there. And so that was always an interesting, like, investigative work to do. But I think that, yeah, definitely with admissions essays, there's going to be a lot more, thought put into vetting those through something as well.
So I think we're out of time. Velma, I didn't know if Velma, are you there?
Yes.
I didn't know if you wanted to say a word or two.
Oh, sure. Please take, there is one more question if you would like to answer. It's in the chat. We can wrap up here in a minute. That's fine. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, it looks like, so is anyone using CRM Recruit and willing to provide contact info? They're preparing to implement it and would like to have a resource. So I can do some thinking. Sandy, I may have some contacts in Illinois that use it. And actually I meet with them on Friday, so I'll see. But if anybody here certainly uses Recruit, get in touch with Sandy and we can get it going. Yeah.
Velma, do you want to go to the next slide? It has our contact information.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Hopefully you
Yeah,
learned
thank
something
you.
or related but let us know if you have any questions or any other thoughts, and thanks for joining.
Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Kristen, and thank you everybody that joined. Have a good one.
Thank you. Thanks.